What if I told you that in one of the most civilized periods in history, the richest people on Earth were so obsessed with status that they turned human beings into part of their decoration? Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. And that was just one of the many things they did to prove they were above everyone else. Before we go deeper, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because what you're about to see only gets darker, stranger, and far more unbelievable than you expect. When most people think about the Victorian era, they imagine elegance, polished manners, grand ballrooms glowing under candlelight, women in elaborate dresses, men in tailored suits, everything controlled, refined, almost perfect. But that image is only the surface. Because behind those perfectly trimmed gardens and silent corridors, there was a completely different reality. One built on extreme wealth, absolute power, and a level of excess that today feels almost unreal. To understand this world, you have to step into it. Imagine waking up in a mansion so large it feels empty, even when it's full. Long corridors stretching endlessly, footsteps echoing against marble floors, servants already moving silently before you even open your eyes. You don't cook, you don't clean, you don't even dress yourself. Every basic function of your life is handled by someone else. Not because you need help, but because you can afford to never touch reality again. This was the life of the Victorian elite, a tiny fraction of society that had accumulated unimaginable wealth during the Industrial Revolution. While entire cities were filled with workers living in cramped, polluted conditions, struggling just to survive, these individuals lived in a completely different universe. Their wealth didn't just give them comfort, it gave them distance. Distance from labor, distance from consequence, distance from what it meant to be human in any ordinary sense. And when you reach that level of wealth, something strange begins to happen. Comfort stops being enough. Because when everything is available, nothing feels special anymore. So the question becomes, how do you prove you are still above everyone else? For the Victorian elite, the answer was simple. You turn your entire life into a performance. Every room, every object, every event becomes a statement. Not just of wealth, but of control, taste, and power. Houses were no longer just places to live. They became stages. Carefully designed environments where every detail was meant to impress, intimidate, and fascinate anyone who entered. Their gardens weren't just gardens, they were engineered landscapes. Perfectly arranged trees, artificial ruins built to look ancient, hidden paths designed to create a sense of mystery. Walking through them wasn't meant to be relaxing, it was meant to feel like stepping into a different reality, one crafted entirely by the owner's will. Inside, the same logic applied. Dining tables weren't about eating, they were about spectacle. Endless courses of food, some imported from the other side of the world, served not because they were needed, but because they could be. Exotic flavors, rare ingredients, dishes designed to impress rather than nourish. Guests weren't just invited, they were exposed to a carefully constructed experience of excess. Even clothing followed this rule. Layers of fabric, restrictive designs, materials that prioritized appearance over comfort. Because discomfort didn't matter, what mattered was the image. The illusion of perfection. The silent message that said, I exist above the limitations that govern everyone else. But here's where things begin to shift. Because once you've turned your home into a stage and your life into a performance, you start looking for something new to display. Something rarer, something that no one else has. And that's when wealth begins to cross a line. Because for some of these individuals, objects were no longer enough. They wanted something alive. They wanted something alive. Something that could not simply be bought in a store, but controlled, shaped, and displayed. Because in that world, the ultimate symbol of power was not what you owned, but what you could command. So the Victorian elite began to push further. Their estates became filled not just with beauty, but with curiosity. Rare animals brought from distant colonies, kept in private enclosures as living trophies. Birds with impossible colors, creatures that no one else in their social circle had ever seen. Owning something exotic meant you had access to the farthest corners of the world, and more importantly, that you could bend those distant places into your personal possession. But animals were only the beginning, because the deeper this obsession with uniqueness went, the more the definition of collection started to change. Wealthy landowners began filling their spaces with objects and experiences designed to provoke reactions. Artificial caves carved into gardens, structures built to look like ancient ruins, even though they were brand new. Entire sections of land redesigned to simulate something raw, something primitive, something untouched, even though every inch of it had been carefully planned. It wasn't about nature. It was about control over nature. The illusion that you could take the wild, the unpredictable, and turn it into something you owned, something that existed purely for your guests to admire. Walking through these estates wasn't just a stroll, it was a curated journey through power itself, where every turn revealed something unexpected, something meant to linger in the mind long after you left. And this is where the psychology becomes impossible to ignore. Because when your entire identity is built on standing above others, normal luxury stops working. Gold becomes common, silk becomes expected, even rare animals begin to lose their impact. And when that happens, the search for the extraordinary doesn't stop. It escalates. Some began to collect what they called human curiosities. Individuals from distant lands brought into these environments not as equals, but as living representations of the exotic. They were displayed, observed, and discussed, often without any real regard for their humanity. To the elite, this wasn't cruelty, it was culture, a demonstration of knowledge, of reach, of sophistication. But beneath that polished explanation, there was something far more unsettling taking shape, because the line between observing a human and owning one was starting to blur. And then, in the quiet corners of these vast estates, something even stranger appeared. Not in the grand halls or the dining rooms, but outside, hidden among the trees, tucked between carefully designed paths and artificial landscapes. Guests would walk through a garden expecting to see statues, stone figures frozen in time, only to notice something was different. One of them would shift slightly. A subtle movement, a breath. At first, it was almost impossible to process, because your mind doesn't expect a statue to be alive. But then you realize it isn't a statue at all. It's a person, a real human being, placed there deliberately, existing as part of the environment, not interacting, not speaking, not engaging, just existing. As if they were another element of the scenery, no different from the trees or the sculptures surrounding them. And once you understand that, the entire illusion of elegance begins to crack. Because this wasn't an accident. It wasn't a rare exception. It was a choice. A deliberate decision made by people who had already experienced every form of luxury and were now searching for something deeper, something more extreme. But if placing a human in a garden as decoration already sounds disturbing, the reality of how these individuals were expected to live was even more unsettling. They weren't simply hired to stand there for a few hours and entertain guests. In many cases, these individuals were contracted to disappear from normal life entirely and adopt a role that stripped away their identity piece by piece. They were instructed to live alone in small structures hidden within the estate, often designed to look like primitive huts or artificial caves, as if they belonged to another time. Their appearance had to match the illusion. They were expected to grow their hair, their beards, to avoid bathing, to look distant, almost otherworldly. And, most disturbingly, they were often forbidden from speaking to anyone who passed by. The goal wasn't interaction, it was presence. A silent, living symbol placed within the landscape to evoke mystery, philosophy, even a sense of unease. To the owners, this represented depth. It suggested that they were not just wealthy, but thoughtful, connected to something ancient, something beyond the modern world. But in reality, what they had created was something far more unsettling. a human being reduced to an aesthetic experience. Imagine the silence of that existence, days blending into weeks, weeks into months, watching people walk by, observing you, whispering about you, but never truly seeing you as a person. You are there, but not really. Present, but invisible in every way that matters. Time becomes distorted. Identity begins to fade. Because when no one speaks to you, when no one acknowledges your voice, it slowly disappears. And yet, from the perspective of the elite, this wasn't cruelty. It was refinement. It was art. It was the ultimate expression of control over environment and narrative. They weren't just shaping landscapes anymore. They were shaping reality itself, deciding what belonged, what didn't, and how everything, and everyone, should exist within their world. But this is where the deeper truth begins to emerge. Because these practices weren't isolated acts of eccentricity. They were the natural outcome of a system where wealth had no ceiling and power had no resistance. When nothing limits you, your imagination becomes the only boundary. And for some, that boundary stretches into places most people would never even consider. Inside the houses, the same pattern repeated in quieter ways. Servants moved through corridors like shadows, trained to anticipate needs before they were spoken. Entire lives existed in service of maintaining the illusion of effortless perfection. The owners rarely saw the machinery behind their comfort. They only experienced the result. A world where everything worked, everything flowed, everything existed exactly as it should, without friction, without resistance. And over time, that kind of environment changes the way you see people. They stop being individuals. They become functions, roles, extensions of your space. Someone who brings your food, someone who prepares your clothes, someone who maintains your world, and eventually, someone who can simply exist within it, silently, as part of the scenery. That's when the shift becomes complete. Because the most extreme form of wealth isn't about what you can buy, it's about what you no longer need to question. When the presence of another human being, stripped of voice and identity, starts to feel normal, even elegant, something fundamental has already been lost. And the most disturbing part is, this wasn't hidden. It wasn't secret. These estates were visited, admired, discussed. Guests walked those gardens, saw those figures, experienced those carefully constructed realities, and accepted them as part of a sophisticated world. A world that believed it represented the peak of civilization. But if that was civilization, then what exactly does that make everything else? And that question is where everything begins to collapse. Because if the peak of civilization allowed people to quietly turn other human beings into objects, then maybe refinement was never what it claimed to be. Maybe it was just a mask, a carefully constructed illusion designed to hide something far more uncomfortable underneath. Because when you strip away the silk, the architecture, the performances, and the rituals, what remains is a simple truth. The more power these individuals accumulated, the further they drifted from anything resembling empathy. Their world became so controlled, so curated, that reality itself started to bend around them. And when reality bends long enough, morality often bends with it. This is why the most unsettling part of the Victorian elite isn't the gardens or the banquets or even the living ornaments. It's how normal it all became, how easily it was absorbed into the definition of good taste. Because once something is normalized by those at the top, it stops being questioned. It becomes culture. It becomes expectation. It becomes invisible. And that invisibility is what allowed these systems to thrive. The same estates that hosted elegant dinners were sustained by unseen labor. The same gardens that inspired awe concealed silent suffering. The same society that praised refinement depended on extreme inequality to exist. Everything was connected, even if it was never acknowledged out loud. Because wealth at that level doesn't just change how you live, it changes how you see the world. It allows you to design environments where discomfort doesn't reach you, where consequences are absorbed by others, where people slowly stop being people and start becoming part of the system that supports you. And once that transformation happens, there's almost no limit to what can be justified. That's what makes this era so important to understand. Not because it was uniquely cruel, but because it reveals a pattern that repeats itself in different forms throughout history. Whenever wealth becomes concentrated enough, whenever power becomes distant enough, the same question always reappears in a different shape. What happens when someone no longer sees others as equals, but as elements? The Victorian elite answered that question in their own way, through spectacle, through control, through environments where everything and everyone existed to reinforce their position at the top. And for a time, it worked. Their world looked flawless, impressive, aspirational, but only from the outside. Because behind that perfection, there was a silence, a quiet absence of something essential, something that no amount of wealth, no matter how extreme, could ever truly replace. And maybe that's the real paradox. The people who seemed to have everything were the ones who had lost the most. If you want to explore more stories like this, where history reveals just how far human behavior can go when power has no limits, tell me in the comments which era we should uncover next. If this story changed the way you see history, imagine what else has been hidden in plain sight all along. There are entire eras filled with secrets, just as disturbing, just as fascinating, and most people never hear about them. So if you want to keep uncovering the darker side of human history, the kind that feels almost unreal but actually happened, make sure you subscribe now, because the next video will take you even deeper into a world where power, survival, and obsession collide in ways you won't expect.